The first thing you noticed about the boys from the 28th, the Keystone Division, was the cough. It wasn't a sickly cough, but a deep, rattling clear of the throat, a sound born from years of breathing air thick with cold dust. Their hands, even when clean, were permanently etched with the black lines of mine shafts and coal seams. They were hard men from the anthracite hills of Pennsylvania, and in the spring of 1918, they found themselves in a very different kind of hell, the mud-choked, corpse-ridden trenches of the Western Front. Sergeant Sean "Shawnee" Finnegan, a bull-shouldered man with a laugh that could shake timbers, stared at the order slip in his hand like it was written in Greek. He'd been a foreman back in Scranton, and now he was being told he and his squad, Liam, the O'Malley brothers, and young, quiet Leo, were being transferred, not to a rest camp, not to the front lines, but to something called the Tunneling Company. What in the name of God is a tunneling company? Liam O'Malley, all sharp angles and nervous energy, asked, peering over Shawnee's shoulder. Are we digging latrines for the generals now? They got their answer from a British major with a perfectly waxed mustache and eyes that had seen too much. He met them in a dugout behind the lines, the air smelling of damp earth and cordite. A large map was spread on a table, but it didn't show trenches or towns. It showed a spiderweb of lines underground. Gentlemen, the major began, his voice crisp. You are miners. You know the earth. Up here, he gestured vaguely upwards. The war is one of artillery and machine guns. A messy, industrial affair. But down there, he tapped the map. It is a different war. A silent war. A war of inches. He explained the concept of mining warfare. Both sides dug tunnels, saps, or mines, under no man's land, the blasted, crater-pocked strip of earth that separated the Allied and German trenches. The goal was simple and horrifying: to dig underneath the enemy's position, pack the end of the tunnel with thousands of pounds of high explosives, and blow them, and a large chunk of the landscape, to kingdom come. The Germans are good at this, the major said flatly. Their pioneers are skilled, methodical, and ruthless. Our own British tunneling companies have been at it for years, but we need men who were born to it. Men who can feel the earth, who can tell the difference between the drip of groundwater and the scrape of an enemy pickaxe. That, I am told, is you. Young Leo, barely 19, paled. We're to fight, underground. In the dark, the major gave a thin, humorless smile. In the dark, Corporal. In the mud. In spaces so tight you can't turn around. You will listen for the enemy, and they will be listening for you. Sometimes, you will break into their tunnel. And then, it becomes very personal. The squad was silent. This wasn't the war they'd signed up for. This was something older, more primal. It was a throwback to siege warfare, fought not in the open air, but in the crushing, suffocating belly of the earth. Their first descent was a baptism of terror. The entrance was a mere hole in the side of a trench, shored up with rough-cut timber, looking like a grave. A British sapper, his face smeared with clay, handed them electric torches and revolvers. Leave the rifles, he said. No room. And for God's sake, be quiet. Sound carries down there like a church bell. Shawnee went first, squeezing his broad shoulders into the hole. The air changed instantly. It was warm, damp, and thick with the smell of raw earth, rot, and the faint, acrid tang of explosives. The tunnel, barely 3 feet wide and 5 feet high, forced him into a permanent stoop. The wooden supports creaked with every shift of the earth above them, a constant, ominous reminder of the thousands of tons of soil and the endless shelling on the surface. The only light was the wobbly beam of his torch, cutting a feeble swath through an absolute, oppressive blackness. The further they went, the more the world above ceased to exist. The rumble of artillery became a dull, distant thud, like a giant's heartbeat. All they could hear was their own ragged breathing, the squelch of their boots in the mud, and the maddening, constant drip, drip, drip of water seeping through the clay. After 20 minutes of this claustrophobic crawl, Shawnee stopped, holding up a hand. He switched off his torch. The others did the same. The blackness was so complete it felt like a physical weight on their eyes. Listen, Shawnee whispered. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of their own hearts pounding in their ears. Then, they heard it. Faint, but unmistakable. A rhythmic scrape, scrape, tap, scrape. It wasn't from their tunnel. It was from somewhere to the left and slightly below. The sound was methodical, professional. German pioneer. Digging. Coming closer. Liam, right behind Shawnee, gripped his arm, his fingers like iron. He didn't need to speak. The message was clear. They're here, and they're close. In that moment, standing in the pitch black, listening to the sound of their death digging its way towards them, the true horror of their new war sank in. This wasn't about flags or glory. It was about surviving the next minute, in the dark, with the rats and the dead and an enemy you could hear but not see. The sound stopped. One moment it was there. Scrape, tap, scrape. A ghostly, metallic heartbeat in the earth. The next, nothing. Just the drip of water and the frantic thumping in their own chests. They heard us. Liam breathed into Shawnee's ear, his voice barely a whisper. Shawnee didn't move a muscle. He was back in the Merrimay colliery, listening for the telltale creak of a failing timber, the groan of a mountain settling. Down here, your ears were your eyes. He held his breath, forcing his heart to slow, and just listened. The silence from the German tunnel was more terrifying than the digging had been. It meant they were also listening. Or worse, they were planning. After what felt like an eternity, Shawnee slowly, silently, clicked his torch back on. The beam seemed blinding now, a beacon in the dark. He gestured with his head for them to move forward, but slower, placing each foot with the care of a man walking on glass. They reached the end of their assigned tunnel, a small, cramped chamber they called a listening post. It was here that their real work began. A British sapper, a man introduced as Corporal Higgins, was waiting for them. He looked like he'd been carved from the clay itself, his skin pale and waxy in the torchlight. "Heard him, did you?" Higgins whispered, his voice raspy. He pointed to a curious device staked into the tunnel floor, a long, sharp metal rod, like a massive needle. "That's a geophone. Put your ear to it." Shawnee, skeptical, leaned down and pressed his ear against the cold metal. The world of solid earth vanished, replaced by a universe of sound. He could hear the gurgle of a distant underground stream, the scrabble of rats' claws, the deep, tectonic shudder of a heavy shell landing far away. It was a symphony of the underworld. And then he heard it, muffled but distinct. A voice, a guttural, sharp command, followed by the softer scrape of a shovel. They were closer than he'd thought. Much closer. He jerked his head back, his eyes wide. Higgins gave a grim nod. "Aye, they're right on the other side of that wall of clay. No more than 10, 15 feet away. Digging a new lateral, I'd wager. Headed for our front line." Liam's face was a mask of terror. "So what do we do? Dig towards them? Fight them in the dark?" Higgins shook his head. "Not unless we have to. That's a messy business. Knives and pistols in a space you can't swing a cat. Our job is to stop them. We dig a countermine." He pointed in a direction perpendicular to the German tunnel. "We get ahead of them. We plant a smaller charge, a camouflage, and we blow their tunnel in on itself. Bury them alive." The words "bury them alive" hung in the thick, stale air. It was one thing to shoot a man across no man's land. It was another to listen to him dig, to hear his voice, and then to collapse his world on top of him. Young Leo, who had been quiet the whole time, suddenly spoke up, his voice trembling. I can't breathe down here." He was starting to hyperventilate, his chest heaving. The walls, which had felt close before, now seemed to be pressing in, crushing him. Shawnee was on him in an instant, grabbing him by the shoulders, his face inches from Leo's. "Look at me, Leo. Look at me. You're a miner. This is just another shift. The air's the same. The dirt's the same. The only thing that's different is the paycheck." He forced a grin, the same one he'd used to calm green kids on their first day in the pits. "You remember your first day at the Hazelton mine? You got spooked when the lift cage dropped, but you got through it. This is no different." Leo's breathing began to slow, his eyes locked on Shawnee's. The familiar words, the familiar confidence, were a lifeline. He nodded, shakily. "Good lad," Shawnee said, clapping him on the back. "Now, you're our best man with a shovel. You and me, we're going to start this countermine. Liam, you're on the geophone. I want to know everything they do. Every pick strike, every foot they dig. The O'Malleys, you're on spoil duty. Get the clay back down the tunnel." Quietly, the work began. It was agonizingly slow. They couldn't use picks for fear of the noise, so they dug with small trowels in their hands, placing each lump of heavy, wet clay into sandbags to be carried away. The air grew hotter, thicker, the smell of their own sweat mixing with the earth. The only sounds were the soft scraping of trowels and Liam's hushed reports from the geophone. They've stopped for a bit. I think they're shoring up their tunnel. Okay, they're moving again. Closer, Shawnee. Definitely closer. They dug for hours, creating a new, narrow tunnel branching off from the listening post. The pressure was immense, a constant, squeezing dread. Every creak of a timber made them jump. Every trickle of dirt from the ceiling sent a jolt of pure fear through their hearts. They were moles, digging a grave, either for the men on the other side of the wall or for themselves. Finally, Shawnee, who was at the face of the new tunnel, stopped. He held up a muddy hand. He'd broken through into a small, natural fissure in the earth. He shone his torch forward, and his blood ran cold. There, nestled in the crevice, was a skeletal hand, still clutching a rusted German stick grenade. They weren't the first to fight in this patch of earth, and the previous tenants had never left. For a full 10 seconds, nobody breathed. The skeletal hand, bleached white and looking almost like a strange, bony root, pointed its grenade directly at them. It was a grisly monument to a fight that had already happened in this very darkness. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, one of the O'Malley brothers whispered, crossing himself so vigorously he almost dropped his sandbag of clay. Shawnee's mind, frozen for a moment, snapped back into action. Easy now, he murmured, his voice low and calm. The foreman taking charge of a dangerous situation. It's just a poor soul who didn't make it home. Don't disturb him. He carefully, reverently, used his trowel to push a small mound of earth over the gruesome relic, giving it a makeshift burial. Consider it a good luck charm. He's watching our backs. The act of covering the dead soldier seemed to break the spell of terror. It was a reminder of the stakes, but also a strange, macabre form of camaraderie with the ghosts of this underground war. They had a job to do. The work on the countermine resumed with a new, grim intensity. The discovery had sharpened their senses. Liam, his ear permanently glued to the geophone, was their lifeline. They're getting louder, Shawnee, he hissed. I can hear him talking clear as day now. Arguing, I think. Sounds like their sergeant is giving one of them hell. Shawnee grinned in the dark, a flash of white in his mud-caked face. Good. Let him argue. A distracted miner is a sloppy miner. He turned to young Leo, who was digging beside him with a ferocity that had replaced his earlier fear. How much further, you think, Leo? You've got the best feel for the rock. Leo paused, running his hand over the clay face in front of them. He closed his eyes, his fingers reading the earth like a book. Another 6 feet, maybe 7. The sound is coming through this seam here, he said, pointing to a faint, damp line in the clay. It's softer. We're close. Close was the most terrifying word in the English language. Close meant that at any moment, a German pick could suddenly burst through the wall in a shower of dirt and splintered timber, followed by a storm of gunfire in a space with nowhere to run. The order came down the line, passed from man to man in a whisper. The explosives were being brought up. A young, nervous-looking engineer from Vermont arrived, carefully carrying a wooden box. Inside, wrapped in waxed paper, were blocks of a putty-like substance, Primus cordite, Higgins explained. It was stable, powerful, and perfect for a camouflage charge. The process of setting the charge was a ritual of exquisite tension. Every movement was slow, deliberate, silent. Shawnee and Leo carefully hollowed out a chamber at the end of their countermine, right up against the wall of earth that separated them from the Germans. The engineer handed them the blocks one by one, and they packed them in, creating a shaped charge designed to blow inward, toward the enemy tunnel, not back toward them. As he worked, Shawnee could hear it now even without the geophone. A faint, rhythmic thump, thump, thump. It was the sound of the German miners shoveling, so close he felt he could almost reach out and touch them. He heard a burst of laughter, strangely normal and human in the horrific setting. One of them was whistling a tune. It was a folk song, something simple and cheerful. For a dizzying moment, Shawnee wasn't in a tunnel under France. He was back in Pennsylvania, and the man on the other side of the wall was just another miner, heading home to his family after a long shift. The feeling vanished when Higgins tapped him on the shoulder and handed him the final component, the fuse. It was a long, flexible tube called safety fuse, filled with a slow-burning powder. Higgins held up his fingers. 15 minutes, he mouthed. 15 minutes from the moment they lit it. 15 minutes for them to evacuate the entire tunnel system. 15 minutes for the men on the other side of the wall to live. Shawnee took the fuse. His hands, which had never shaken once in 20 years of mining, were trembling. This was different. This wasn't an accident of nature, a collapse, or a gas leak. This was deliberate. This was murder in the dark. He looked at the faces of his squad, lit by the single, guttering candle they used for the final task. Liam, eyes wide. The O'Malleys, praying silently. Leo, looking at him, waiting for the order. They were all waiting. He gave a short, sharp nod. Higgins struck a match. The flare was blinding in the absolute blackness. He touched it to the end of the fuse. There was a sharp hiss, a puff of smoke, and a tiny, glowing red eye started crawling its way along the tube, eating up the minutes, eating up the lives of the men on the other side. Go, Shawnee barked, his voice no longer a whisper. Now, all the way back. Move. There was no need for silence anymore. The race was on. They scrambled back down the narrow tunnel, a frantic, stumbling parade in the dark, the hiss of the fuse chasing them like the devil himself. The 15-minute countdown had begun, and every second was a scream in the silence. The tunnel, once a place of stifling silence, was now a chaotic, frantic race against a tiny, burning spark. They moved in a single, desperate file, their breath coming in ragged gasps that echoed off the tight clay walls. The world had shrunk to the bobbing circle of light from their torches and the frantic need to put distance between themselves and the coming blast. Go, go, go! Shawnee roared from the back of the line, herding his men like sheep before a storm. He could still hear the faint, insistent hiss of the fuse behind them, a sound that seemed to grow louder, not quieter, as they fled. The O'Malley brothers, big and strong, were surprisingly fast, their bulk scraping against the timber supports and sending showers of dirt down on them. Liam, lean and wiry, moved like a ferret, his panic giving him speed. But young Leo, just ahead of Shawnee, was struggling. The claustrophobia was clawing at him again, his movements becoming jerky and uncoordinated. Leo, look forward. Don't think about it, just run. Shawnee yelled, shoving him gently from behind. They burst out of the lateral tunnel and into the slightly wider main gallery, the one that led back to the surface. The air felt marginally fresher, but there was no time to appreciate it. They still had 100 yards of twisting, treacherous tunnel to cover. That's when they heard it. A new sound from behind them. Not the hiss of the fuse, but a different, more immediate danger. A sharp, splintering crack. Then a voice, shouting in German. It was close. Alarmed. The charge. Liam panted, skidding to a halt and looking back, his face a mask of horror. They must have broken through the wall. They saw the fuse. The plan was unraveling. If the Germans found the charge, they could pull the fuse. They could disarm it. And then they would know exactly where the American tunnel was, and they would be coming through, furious and vengeful. Shawnee didn't hesitate. He made a split-second decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Keep going. Get to the surface. That's an order. What are you doing? Leo screamed. I'm buying time. Go. Shawnee turned, drew his revolver, and ran back towards the hissing sound, towards the enemy. He was plunging back into the belly of the beast. He scrambled back into the narrow countermine, his heart hammering against his ribs like a sledgehammer. The hissing was louder now, a furious, spitting sound. He could see the glowing red ember of the fuse, maybe 30 feet away, and he could see shadows moving at the end of the tunnel. A beam of a German electric torch flickered through a fresh, jagged hole in the clay wall. A hand reached through, grasping for the sizzling fuse. Shawnee didn't aim. He just pointed his revolver into the darkness and fired. The bang was cataclysmic in the confined space, a physical blow to the ears. The flash illuminated the tunnel for a split second, freezing the scene in a stark, terrifying tableau. The German hand pulling back, a face contorted in shock and fury in the hole in the wall. He fired again, and again, the bullets thudding into the earth around the breach. He wasn't trying to hit anyone. He was creating a storm of noise and fear, a barrier of lead to keep them away from that fuse. Shouts echoed from the other side, angry and confused. A pistol shot answered his, the bullet whining past his head and burying itself in the timber next to him. Splinters stung his cheek that he was in a shooting gallery, and he was the target. He fired his last 2 rounds, the slide of his Colt locking back on an empty chamber. The hissing of the fuse was the only sound now, agonizingly slow. How much time had passed? A minute? 5. It felt like a lifetime. He had done all he could. He turned and ran, his lungs burning, his ears ringing. He didn't look back. He just ran, following the fleeing torchlight of his men ahead. He stumbled out of the lateral and into the main tunnel, his legs pumping, driven by pure adrenaline. He saw the blessed rectangle of gray, murky light that was the surface entrance. Hands reached down, grabbing him, hauling him up and out of the hole. He collapsed onto the duckboards of the trench, gasping in the cold, smoky air of the surface world. He had just enough time to see his squad's terrified, relieved faces and to hear Higgins shout, "Cover!" Before the world ended, that IT didn't start with a sound. It started with a feeling. As Shawnee lay gasping on the muddy duckboards, the earth beneath him gave a deep, visceral shudder. It was a feeling he knew from the mines, the terrifying groan of a mountain shifting. But this was 1,000 times worse. It was as if the planet itself had taken a sickening, rolling breath. Then came the sound, a deep, muffled whump from the depths, a sound so low and powerful it was felt more than heard in the bones. It was the stomach punch of the devil. For a heart-stopping second, there was a profound, unnatural silence. The constant background rumble of the artillery stopped, as if the guns themselves were holding their breath. Then, the trench erupted. The ground beneath their feet bulged. It wasn't an explosion on the surface. It was the earth pregnant with violence, swelling upwards in a wave of soil, sandbags, and splintered timber. A section of the parapet, 20 yards to their left, simply rose into the air like a slow-motion nightmare. Men were thrown from the fire step like rag dolls. The real sound hit them then. It was a roaring, tearing cataclysm that ripped apart the world. A colossal jet of fire, soil, and shattered debris vomited from the ruptured earth in no man's land. It climbed into the sky, a black and orange pillar of pure destruction, taller than the church steeple back in Scranton. The concussion wave hit the trench like a physical wall, knocking everyone off their feet and sucking the air from their lungs. Shawnee, clinging to a support beam, watched in awe and horror. Trees, men, pieces of artillery, entire sections of German trench were tossed into the air like toys in the fist of a giant. The sky rained dirt and stone and things he didn't want to identify. A fine, gray, choking dust descended, blotting out the sun, turning the world into a twilight of powdered death. Through the ringing in his ears, he heard the screams. Not from the German lines, but from his own. The upheaval had collapsed a section of their own trench, burying men alive. The shockwave had torn others apart. The war on the surface, which they had temporarily forgotten, had just delivered its brutal reply to their underground war. He scrambled to his feet, his body aching, his mind reeling. "The squad," he bellowed, his voice a ragged croak in the chaos. Leo. He found them huddled together in a corner of the trench, miraculously unharmed but coated head to toe in the gray dust, their eyes wide with a terror that went beyond anything they had felt in the tunnels. The underground was a personal, intimate horror. This was an apocalyptic, indiscriminate one. Liam grabbed his arm, his grip like a vice. "Shawnee, my God, what did we do?" Before Shawnee could answer, the whistle started. High, piercing shrieks cutting through the dust and the moans. Officers were running down the trench line, their faces masks of grim determination. "That's the signal," one yelled. Go, over the top. Take the crater. The massive, smoldering hole they had just blown in no man's land. It was now the objective. It was a tactical feature, a new piece of high ground in the shattered landscape, and they were expected to charge into it. Shawnee looked at his men, his miners, his tunnel rats. They were not infantry. They were not meant for this. But the war didn't care. He met Leo's eyes, saw the boy struggling to find his courage one more time. He saw the O'Malleys, their prayers finished, now gripping their rifles with a resigned fury. He picked up a rifle from a fallen soldier, the wood slick with mud. He looked at his squad, these hard men from the coal country, and gave a single, sharp nod. "The job's not finished," he yelled, his voice finding its old strength. "We made the hole. Now we have to hold it. For the 28th. For Pennsylvania. Let's go." And with a roar that was swallowed by the continuing thunder of the barrage, Sergeant Sean Finnegan led his tunnel rats up a scaling ladder, out of the trench, and into the hellfire of no man's land. The world outside the trench was a different planet, one painted in mud and fire. The air, thick with the chalky dust from the blast, tasted of burned powder and blood. The roar was overwhelming. Machine guns from the German lines now stitching the air, their own artillery providing a creeping barrage ahead of them, and the constant, sickening whiz and crack of sniper rounds. Shawnee didn't think. He ran. He ran towards the colossal, smoking pit they had created. The ground underfoot was a churned-up nightmare of shell holes, tangled wire, and the dead. The new crater wasn't just a hole. It was a raw, gaping wound in the earth, hundreds of feet across, its edges still smoldering. To the crater. Use the lip for cover, he bellowed, his voice raw. They stumbled, slid, and fell down the steep, loose slope of the crater's edge, joining a handful of other doughboys who had made the charge. The bottom was a scene of surreal horror. Steam rose from patches of hot earth. The sides were littered with the unthinkable, shattered equipment, pieces of timber from the German dugouts deep below, and the broken, buried dead from both sides. The air reeked of cordite and something else, something deeply buried and now unearthed. This was the fruit of their labor. This was the result of their weeks of silent, claustrophobic work. They were now standing in the grave they had dug for others, and it was to be their own fortress. Dig in, Shawnee yelled, already using his entrenching tool to scrape at the loose soil. They'll counterattack. They'll want this hole back. The squad fell into the old, familiar rhythm. They were miners, and digging was in their blood. Even Leo, his face a pale, determined mask, worked with a frantic energy, carving out a shallow firing position on the crater's lip. They piled up loose dirt, chunks of clay, and even the bodies of the fallen to create a makeshift parapet. They didn't have to wait long. A German whistle shrieked from the other side of the crater, and gray-clad figures began to emerge from their own shattered trenches, advancing through the smoke. Here they come, Liam screamed, fumbling with his rifle. Pick your targets. The fight for the crater was a brutal, close-range affair. Grenades arced through the air, exploding in gouts of earth. The chatter of a Lewis gun from further along the crater rim joined the sharper crack of rifles. Men fell, tumbling down the slopes. The Germans were determined, furious at the violation of their line. Shawnee fired, reloaded, and fired again, his world shrinking to the sights of his rifle and the advancing gray shapes. He saw one of the O'Malley brothers take a round to the shoulder, spinning back into the crater with a cry. Liam, his face smeared with blood from a grazing wound, fought like a demon, his shots measured and deadly, but the pressure was immense. They were outnumbered, pinned in the very hole they had made. Ammunition was running low. The German fire was intensifying, pinning them down. Shawnee knew it was only a matter of time. He looked at Leo, who was lying next to him, his rifle hot to the touch. The boy's eyes were wide, but his hands were steady. He was no longer the scared kid from the tunnel. He was a soldier. Then Leo pointed. Shawnee, look, through the smoke, from their own lines, a fresh wave of American troops was coming. A proper infantry platoon, bayonets fixed, charging across the torn ground to reinforce them. A cheer, ragged and desperate, went up from the men in the crater. The tide turned. The German advance wavered, caught between the stubborn defenders in the crater and the fresh troops hitting their flank. The fight dissolved into a chaotic, close-quarter melee before the surviving Germans began to fall back. As quickly as it had begun, the fury subsided. An uneasy quiet fell over the crater, broken only by the moans of the wounded and the distant, ever-present thunder of the war. They had done it. They had taken and held the crater. Exhausted, Shawnee slumped back against the dirt wall. He looked around at what was left of his squad. They were battered, bleeding, and covered in the grime of two different wars, the black clay of the tunnels and the gray dust of the surface. They had started as miners, became tunnel rats, and were now, irrevocably, soldiers. Leo sat down beside him, offering a canteen. "We made it, Sarge," he said, his voice quiet. Shawnee took a long swallow of warm, metallic-tasting water. He looked up at the gray, smoke-choked sky, a sky he hadn't been sure he'd ever see again. He thought of the men they had buried in the tunnel, the hiss of the fuse, the roar of the blast, and the fury of the fight for this patch of ruined earth. He put a heavy, dirty hand on Leo's shoulder. "Aye, lad," he said, his voice thick with exhaustion and something else, something like grief. "We made it, but the shift ain't over yet." He looked down into the depths of the crater, a scar they had carved into the world, and knew that somewhere, deep below, the Germans would already be digging again. The silent war was waiting for them to come back down.